Welcome to the Purpose and Profit Club podcast for nonprofit leaders, mission-driven creatives, and social entrepreneurs. Get ready to stop dreaming and start doing. Here, ideas become action. We prioritize purpose and profit. You ready? Let's go. Thanks to our friends at Neon One for sponsoring this episode. Neon One connects nonprofits with the technology and resources that empower them to build a community of generosity. Their platform is designed to manage the full range of nonprofit operational needs, from marketing to revenue generation to program operations and financial reconciliation. Learn more at Neon One. Don't forget, click the show notes to grab the 2024 Recurring Giving Report and 2023 Nonprofit Email Report. All right, let's get to the show. All right, everyone, she's back for round two. We've got Abby Jarvis, head of content at Neon One, and we're going to dig into the latest data about recurring giving. And one of the things that, Abby, you do so well is distill the data so that I don't go into overwhelm going, well, I think this chart that goes up and to the right is good, but what does that actually mean for my organizations? We're going to dig into that. And the headline here is that there has been major growth in recurring giving in the last 5 years. Yeah? So dig in.
All right. So this report is something I'm really excited about. It's something, if you've met Tim Sarantonio, like, you know how passionate he is about the data. We started dreaming about this particular study before I even started working for Neon One. So when we actually started digging into it, we were really excited to see, I think, especially some of the trends that we see in growth in recurring giving. And the reason that is so exciting is because of all of the negative trends that the industry, frankly, has been talking about for a little while. We've seen headlines about declining individual giving. We've seen all the headlines about how donor retention remains a struggle. And yeah, those are really important trends that we must pay attention to. However, I also am very much of the persuasion that if there is something negative, you have to look for the positives also. And a positive that we found in this research was that there is growth in recurring donors. And if you want to get down into like the really nitty gritty specific,
we do.
So, all right. So for the purposes of this conversation, the study that we're looking at looked at patterns in recurring giving and some patterns in individual giving between the years 2018 and 2022. So it's a 5-year period. We included a little over 2,000 nonprofits in this study. The reason it's 2,000 and not more is because we wanted to look only at organizations that had transactions every year in that time period. So it was a true apples to apples comparison. Reflected in that is a little over 100,000 individual recurring donors. So it's a pretty significant sample size. What we found is that across the industry, the average nonprofit's database of active supporters, so people who are actively giving, either stayed the same or decreased a little bit. So industry-wide, we saw a decrease of around 3.5% in active supporters. So that's the bad news. The good news is that we saw a 127% increase in the number of supporters who are choosing to make monthly gifts. And that's really remarkable. So if you are looking at some of the headlines and you're stressing out, a thing that you can reassure yourself with is that there are people who are making these big commitments for the causes they love, and they are there for you if you prioritize asking them.
Yes. Okay. And that really, to me, is like one of the big things we talk about is just retention. It's so hard. So many donors are one and done. And so the lifetime value, let's dig into that. The lifetime value of a recurring donor is so much more significant. So by the end of this episode, or really 10 minutes in, I hope that you're going to be like, this is a priority. We really need to make sure that we're starting or growing our recurring giving program. So let's talk about retention.
Oh my gosh.
Or lifetime value. Yeah, both.
Let's do it. All right. So let's do the numbers first. All right. So the average recurring donor, and you're going to hear me say the word recurring a lot in this instead of monthly. I mostly mean monthly, but I'm pedantic, and there are a handful of donors represented in this set that give on a different cadence. The vast majority of people are giving monthly. Some people are giving like every other week or weekly. So that's why I tend to use the word recurring instead of monthly. You can insert monthly.
Smart.
All right. When we look at retention rates for one-time donors, it was around 36% across this 5-year period. When we looked at the retention rates for recurring donors, it was 78%. So the retention rates alone are something to celebrate. What I think is even more significant is how long those recurring donors stay retained. When we looked at like a donor lifetime, so how long someone is actually engaging with a nonprofit, the average donor lifetime for a non-recurring donor was 1.73 years. For recurring donors, it was more than 8. And for a lot of organizations, so we looked at the benchmarks across the industry. We also looked at them broken down by revenue band. So mid-sized nonprofits that have annual revenue between $1 and $5 million, it was more than 10 years. These people stick around for a really long time. And so something I hear a lot from fundraisers, I'll hear, we see that, yeah, we have recurring donors. But when they give over the course of the year, they give on an annual basis much less than people who don't make recurring gifts. And that's absolutely accurate. So when we looked at retention rates and lifetimes, we also looked at annual giving patterns. And yes, the average non-recurring donor gave a little over $2,000 a year. The average recurring donor gave just under $950. However, when we take that annual giving and look at it over a long period of time, the average non-recurring donor's donor lifetime value is around $3,500. The average recurring donors is it's almost $8,000. So I know if you are a fundraiser and you are considering whether or not to launch a recurring program, there is absolutely the fear that encouraging someone to make this kind of gift will result in them giving less over the course of the year. And that may be the case, but they will be engaged with you for so much longer.
I have so many thoughts. It's like the instant gratification. It's like, well, I'd rather have $20 now than like $200 over a longer lifetime. And I do think there's something about the cost of time here, because the cost of a fundraiser, an executive director, a team, constantly refilling the bucket of donors because they're churning, because they're saying, I want the $20 now. And it's just that hamster wheel versus what if we actually like create something that's scalable and sustainable, and how that creates more time. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing so you said create something more sustainable and scalable. And I wanted to call out something that it makes me sad, but also delights me when I'm looking at these numbers. From what we can tell, the growth that we're seeing in recurring giving, the lifetime that we're seeing in recurring donors, the contributions that we're seeing from recurring donors seem to be happening without many of the organizations in this study having a recurring giving program. A lot of the organizations in this set are not asking for recurring gifts. They're not intentionally building plans for those donors. They're not intentionally cultivating those relationships. People are electing to make these gifts without being asked. So if we're seeing this growth, what would happen if you did focus on creating something more sustainable and scalable? So another really cool trend that we found is that, and again, keep in mind, this is happening independent of people actually engaging these donors and building recurring programs. 50% of the recurring donors in this set made additional gifts. So you're not asking someone to make a monthly gift and risking never getting anything else from them. And not only are they making additional gifts, they're volunteering and they're serving as board members and they're purchasing memberships and they're going to events. These are some of the most engaged, dedicated, passionate individuals in these databases. And it's happening organically. What could happen if nonprofits really embrace this style of fundraising? It's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm thinking about just consumers in general. And if you think about how much we are trained now on subscriptions and memberships, right? How many subscriptions do I have to Amazon and Netflix and just a trove of others, because we need this to watch sports. We need this for kids. And it's like, we are used to this monthly or some sort of recurring thing. And so it makes sense that people would organically default to be like, oh, I'll give on a monthly basis. I'll just check that box. And so it does show the possibility of like, if this is what we're doing just in our daily life, like what if nonprofits actually intentionally tried to really put a powerful giving program out? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the intentionality that I really want to focus on. Because one thing that, I was talking to Tim about this. So we were talking about like the subscription economy and this and that. And one thing so I do think you're right. We are now much more open to the concept of setting up a recurring donation. I worry that nonprofits will hear people like me talking about a subscription economy and think that because people are now more conditioned to create a monthly gift, that we are giving to nonprofits in the same way that we pay for a Netflix subscription or an Amazon subscription. And the reason that concerns me is because of some other research we did as part of this study. So we looked at the benchmarks, looked at the data, but we also dug into donor motivations and why people are making these gifts. And what we found, and I can go into how we found it later, but what we found is that over and over and over again, donors are telling people, they're telling the nonprofits they're supporting, that their decision to make an ongoing gift is deeply emotional, it's deeply personal, and it is deeply tied to their sense of their own identities. And that's a really important differentiator, because my decision to pay for Netflix is not an emotional decision at all. Maybe I want to watch, I don't know, Tiger King. Tiger King is an old reference. I can't think of anything else. But it's not an emotional decision. That is a consumer choice. It's not a compassionate choice. And I think the emphasis on compassion is really important. So yes, by all means, embrace monthly giving. We are very conditioned to make that kind of gift. Just if you're a fundraiser and you're listening to this, like, please remember this is someone investing in something that they care very deeply about. It's so much more beautiful than a Hulu subscription.
It's not arbitrary. Yes. While the back end, so it's like top line, we're totally in agreement. It is like, I don't know, a million years ago, you remember when like debit cards, I remember like certain people are like, I'm not having a debit card. And now everybody has a debit card, right? It's like, we do have now the like culture of it, of like, I'll just put this on. So that's good. But you mentioned identity and compassion. And so for an organization, like everyone who's listening, who's like, yeah, but how do I do that? I think one of the big questions is really, how do I create a monthly giving program or grow my monthly giving program in a way that is sustainable, in a way that I do have that two-way conversation with people, but I'm also time strapped. And I think that's one of the challenges that people experience is like, what should be in it? What do they get is essentially the question I'm asked a lot. Yeah. So what would you say to that?
All right. So the first thing I'll say is that the advice I give to everybody who asks me this question, the first is like, just start. You don't have to have a fully fledged, very intricate system for this. Just start. Enable recurring gifts on your form. Just give people the option. Occasionally ask about it. Let people know it's there. I would say once you get beyond that, I would interrogate the what do they get question. Because I think it implies that people are looking to get something like a benefit or a service, and that in a way that may be true. So what are people looking to get? They're looking to be part of a movement or an effort or something that is deeply tied to something they love. That's what they're looking to get. You can give that to them in a few different ways. You can give that to them in the communications you send them. You can, tweak your thank you letters and tweak your newsletters and tweak those things. So segment out your recurring donors, adjust the content you're already creating and sending to your broader donor base, and just make little adjustments to call out their generosity and call out their passion and call out their commitment, and then just communicate with them. One thing I have seen be very effective, because there is that desire to be a part of something larger than them. We've seen nonprofits have a ton of success just creating a name for their recurring donors. If you look at their report, one of the organizations we talked to, they have their recurring program, and members of that program are called the Key Club. And when you're part of a named group, you're part of something special. So, I mean, psychologically, we love it. That's why when we're kids, like we all start clubs when we're little kids, because we want to be part of something. Give it a name, communicate with those members, and just tell them what is happening and how they're helping make that possible. When I talk about understanding people's motivations, I think there are a few things that you can do, even if you are a fundraiser that's strapped for time. When we looked at donor motivations and how their emotions and their identities influence their decision to give, what we did was we looked at all of the forms that the 2,000 some odd organizations built for this. We found that a number of them had open-ended fields on their donation forms where they invited their recurring donors to leave a gift, or not, sorry, to leave a note as they are giving, explaining what motivated them to give, what inspired them to do this. And Christina, people poured their hearts out in these notes. It was beautiful. I have a background in like donation form optimization and whatnot. And when I found out that people were adding these fields, I was like, no, you're going to ruin your conversion rate. And I mean,
that's right. Friction.
Right. They're not going to create friction. So what they did was if you do this, please don't make it a required field. Just don't do that. But what they did, and we found something like 13,000 notes left in these fields. So what we did is we cleaned them up. We scrubbed it of all identifying information. We used an AI tool to do a sentiment analysis. So we asked it to identify emotions, and we also asked it to look at identity markers like demographics and whatnot. And you can do that. You probably won't have 13,000 notes from 13,000 individual donors, but you'll probably get a handful. And if you just take a few minutes every week to look at the notes that people leave you, you will get a feel for what is inspiring your community to give you this kind of gift. Once you understand what is inspiring your community to give that kind of gift, you can do an even more efficient job communicating with them. So, for example, say you are an animal shelter and you notice that a lot of people who are making recurring gifts are people who have adopted a pet through your shelter. You can then put together an appeal for recurring gifts and tweak it a little bit for your adopters, and send that out. You can make sure you are sharing stories and updates about animals that were placed or received care through your program. I mean, you don't have to build huge, intense systems to do it. It'll take a few minutes every once in a while, but you can do it.
I think for an organization too that has multiple programs, it helps their staff understand a through line of like, why are people joining, right? And then you're saying you can not only create some content for the people who did join, updates, but on the front door, when you're trying to get more recurring donors in, you can start to create some content around that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What you're getting is, let's be honest. If you're a very busy fundraiser, having those two-way conversations with all of the donors in your base, that's not reasonable. You can't do that. You will exhaust yourself trying. But what you can do is you can invite people to talk to you, and then you can get a feel for your whole base and start communicating with them more effectively because you know what motivates them. And the longer your program goes on, the more that communication will probably change and evolve and improve. And there's so much potential there.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to give you another very common, I want to call it objection, but it's not an objection as much as it is just like a now what, right? Which is, we tried this, like, no, we've got recurring giving. Like, it is on the website, it is there. And we've got, less than 10 people who have signed up. And it's mainly, my aunt, my board member, and my number one volunteer. And no one else has signed up. Like, how do I get more? So what would you say? And it can be from a data perspective, it can be more strategy. What do you think?
So I'm going to come at this from a marketing perspective because that is my background. So it's very easy to say, we've tried this before, it didn't work, we're not going to do it anymore. That's understandable. However, the data is telling us that that is not necessarily the case. People want to give this away. So I would tell you to start experimenting. What have you tried in the past? As much as I'm going to contradict myself. I have said that we've seen this growth happen organically and people are not asking. That said, recurring giving is not necessarily an if you build it, they will come kind of thing. And the reason I'm going to say that is because earlier I cited that 127% increase, but I want to tell you the numbers behind that. When we looked at this set at the beginning of the time period that we evaluated in 2018, the average nonprofit had 11 recurring donors. By the end of the set, they had 25. So yes, that is 127% growth. That is significant. However, this is an indicator to us that as people are turning this on and enable recurring gifts, people are not coming in the hundreds to make this kind of donation. So have it, great. Have you been asking people about it? Specifically, have you been making a case for why they should do that instead of making a one-time gift? And have you been making a case for why they should do it now and not sometime in an ill-defined future? So one thing we talk about a lot in marketing is calls to action and value propositions and this and that. And you have to tweak your language a little bit when you're coming at it from a philanthropic perspective, because value proposition is an upsetting phrase to use sometimes. But I think you have to use it. There's no better phrase. Why should your donor make this gift?
Yeah. What's in it for me?
And that's where I think things get kind of tricky. Is coming up with that. So one thing we did in this report is we had some experts from the industry talk about how nonprofits can really promote this. And one thing that came up, I think it was Dana Snyder, talked about treat it like an event. You wouldn't throw up an event on a form on your site and expect people to give. You're going to talk to them about it. You're going to invite them. You're going to tell them why it's cool.
If you've got tickets to sell, you're going to talk about that often.
Often. That's the other big thing. Yeah. So something that I do this too in my capacity as a marketer. When you eat, sleep, and breathe your mission and your campaigns and your programs, this is top of mind for you at all times. So if you put together a recurring giving form and you send an email about it and you post about it on social a couple of times and nothing happens, to you, that has taken up a huge part of your mental space. To your community, that may not have stuck. We know that when we are talking to, in my marketing, we know that we have to talk to people multiple times with the same message in multiple channels for it to stick. If you have tried something and it hasn't worked, I would encourage you to continue trying. And if you keep trying and nothing works, start experimenting, switch up your messaging, switch up the images on your form.
You went back to earlier too, is like, did we even call it something? Because that's the first piece. Like, again, people want that identity, right? They want that piece. They also, like, if you did one launch, one campaign, some social post, I honor, yes, that took time. And yes, that took effort. And yes, that took brain space. And your organization is not yet known for this. Like, no one knows about your club yet, and as a business owner, I've seen that again and again and again. Like, I have to continually talk about it. And so it's a good reminder of, like, are those two boxes checked off? And then I think the last thing that a lot of organizations get stuck in the weeds on is the value proposition. Because what's in it for the nonprofit is very clear: sustainable revenue, monthly revenue. But what's in it for the donor, that's not a compelling why. And I want to talk about that for a second. Because they're like, but Christina, that's the point, right? It's just like, no one's excited to donate for operations and overhead. We know this. That's why some organizations like Charity Water have done this sort of other thing. But so we don't want to necessarily talk about the value proposition being, well, it helps us have sustainable recurring revenue. So let's talk about what the value proposition might be.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to use as an example an organization that I donate to monthly.
Perfect.
So interestingly, we found that a lot of the gifts that people give are not restricted. So they're not necessarily put toward a particular fund. So people are funding operations. Fine. Not compelling, like you said. So when you have a monthly subscription to Netflix, you get something, you get access to all of these shows. When you make a monthly gift to your favorite cause, you do get something. You get to be part of work that is very important to you. So I give a monthly gift to Conservation Florida. And what I get from that is I am part of a group of people that we're working together to preserve Florida's natural places. I'm passionate about it. I camp and hike and backpack and do all the things. And they tell me all the time what my support is achieving. So I keep it on my desk. It's actually fairly beat up. But I get periodic cards and postcards. And this one, they sent it to me. We are excited to announce the permanent protection of 1,285 Highlands County acres. And
social proof, y'all. Social proof. What we're doing works.
That's the value proposition. I have no illusions that my monthly gift bought more than 1,200 acres of endangered ecosystems, but I am part of the group that did that. That's the value proposition. I helped.
You helped. And that identity piece too of I want to be someone who blank, right? I want to be someone who helps the environment right now in my city, in my community, in my state, and leaves it at least better than I found it, right? Of that piece.
And they have it, there's a line at the end that I really love. I mean, they talk a little bit about what actually went on and where it is and what kind of species are there they're protecting. But they said, we're incredibly proud and grateful to know that this land will never be a subdivision or development. And that's because of your support. That's the value proposition.
Good.
That's it.
Okay. So that's a little bit of, I love that. That's a little bit of story brand negative stakes. So I've talked about that a little bit on the podcast of what will happen if you do, what will happen if you don't. And so what they just did with that is they gave you social proof of like, this is what we were able to accomplish. And without you, it would have looked like this, right? That's so smart. I love it.
And that's the value proposition. And you can do that with any mission, any vertical. The value proposition is what your donors are helping do together. And I think the together thing is a really big deal, especially for monthly gifts.
Yeah. So smart. Okay. How often or what do you think it should look like for an organization? I'm thinking about their 12-month calendar. Okay. So I'm thinking about they naturally have maybe some events, some fundraisers, some online campaigns. How often should they be actually calling to become a recurring donor? Like, what does that look like in the overall strategy?
So we don't have any data around how frequently you should be asking for these appeals, how much you should talk about it. I think, and I'm making this up as I go, because again, like I don't have data around this. Treat it like an event, and I would almost do it, I don't know, like really emphasize it a couple of times a year. You're going to have to feel out how.
I love it. No, you're right on the money. You're right on the money. So I call these like sprints or mini campaigns.
One thing I would say, like, look at what's on your calendar. What is coming up that would be a really good opportunity for you to have this conversation? So if you are a conservation group, is there a conservation month? Could you launch a campaign around it? Do you have, in this case, a piece of land that is being threatened with being turned into a housing development? Launch a campaign around that. So I don't think that there is necessarily a number. You should ask for a recurring gift 6 times a year. I don't think you can do that. I think it should be regular. It should be intentional. It should be as natural as asking for one-time donations. And I would encourage you to I'm half joking when I use the word vibes, but like feel it out. What is appropriate? And you know your supporter base better than I do. And I don't want to give you a number because then you'll take.
Well, there is no one right answer. And otherwise there would be one marketing book at the bookstore for us to all get. But I think that's a great piece. And there's two kind of memories that I'm having. One is we were just talking about this idea of like, are you known for it yet? And you might not be known for it yet. And the only way to be known for your recurring giving program is to continue to talk about it, not 24/7, but to have some peaks and valleys throughout the year. The second one is I had this flash of like 5+ years ago, there's an organization here in Atlanta, and they started every June. They were like 30 donors in 30 days for recurring. And they did this like sprint for it. And it actually started to do two things. One is it really reminded me, or I started to really have brand recognition for their recurring donor program, right? As I started to associate that, I was like, oh yeah, that's what that is. Two is it got me excited every June. It was like hyped up because they did a great social push for it. You know, it was like day 21. All right, you guys, here's how many have joined. Shout out to, Mary and Marco and, everybody who's joined. And so it started to also train me on like, oh, that's what they do in June. So there's an opportunity there on just like, how do you weave it into like your greater calendar?
Yes. Yeah. And one thing that I would say when you're making yourself known about this, you don't have to make yourself known for asking all the time. Every time we talk about it, doesn't have to be like, give me $20 a month.
That's right.
There are so many other ways you can talk about your recurring program without it being heavy-handed. Probably isn't the phrase, but it doesn't have to be a
call to action.
Right.
Call to action. Yeah.
So say I'm going to use this other. I'm going to make an allusion to the Key Club. I haven't seen them post like this. So the Key Club is again the recurring giving like group from IPH. They're in the study. You can read about them there. You could do something as simple as check out this picture from this campaign that we did. Our Key Club did a great job supporting this. If you want to learn more about the Key Club and how to join, here's a link. Just talk about it. Or, hey, did you see we got our 50th member of the Key Club? The Key Club is a group of people who give on a monthly basis to achieve this thing together. If you're interested in being part of this, here's where to like
even the postcard you just got could be adapted for an update for people outside of recurring giving. Like, here's what this group was able to be a part of, right? So smart.
So just showing them off. And you're doing two things. You're celebrating your most committed supporters and you're signaling to people who are not yet part of that group that you value those people and they're doing amazing things, and you're creating a little bit of FOMO. They might want to join.
I love it. Okay, so before we shift gears and talk a little bit about your end, I just want to underscore and highlight that at no point in this conversation have you said anything that feels like a lot of time in order for success, or anything that feels like a lot of stuff. Sometimes we're like, but I have to give them hats and t-shirts and a crazy welcome kit. And I need to have a meetup for all my recurring donors. And I need to have a kickoff event. You haven't said any of that stuff.
No, you can certainly do those things. And I would encourage you, if you're just absolutely killing the game and you've got all the time in the world to get really, but who does? Like totally delight your donors, surprise them, send them a postcard. But I'll tell you this postcard has been on my desk for months now, and it makes me happy every time I look at it. And you didn't have to send me a hat, and I haven't been to a party. I have another, it's on my refrigerator. They sent me another card that had a sticker in it. Like I get a message from them maybe twice a year. All of the other stuff is just frosting on.
That's right.
It's cool, but it's not necessary. And the thing, so I do encounter this a lot. Fundraisers will be intimidated, like, oh, I have to give them special communications and I have to send them postcards and stickers and I have to do the things. Don't. Remember, these are people who there is data behind it. They are passionate about your cause. They are committed to the work that you're doing, and they are human beings. They will be gracious to you. Just try.
Yeah. So good. Thank you. Okay, let's dig into year end. Okay. So year end is when we see typically this huge influx of funding, huge influx of just all hands on deck for fundraising, right? And then we also see sometimes a huge influx of churn. So how does this conversation about recurring giving weave in to your end? What should we do? What should we look out for, not do?
Okay, so what should we do? Ask for this. So when we were doing this report, we wanted to look at when people are actually making these gifts. Humorously, and this has been the topic of many conversations with a lot of people, May, absolutely tremendous month for recurring giving. No one can agree why. We've had a lot of conversations about it. To no one's surprise, though, the other two most common months for recurring gifts are December, that's number 2, and November. So ask. People are creating these gifts. Now, another thing that came up, a lot of people make recurring gifts on Giving Tuesday. More than I thought. So when we looked, and I have to be really clear about how I say this because it's kind of confusing. So Giving Tuesday always falls the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, but it can either fall in November as it did last year or December as it does this year. Regardless of the month, recurring donations initiated on Giving Tuesday account for around 12% of all recurring gifts initiated that month. So November and December. That's pretty significant. 12% is nothing to sneeze at. The other thing that we noticed, and this is new data, it's not in the report yet. I'm actually getting ready to start drafting a addition to the recurring giving report that focuses on Giving Tuesday and year end. Some concern that I have heard is if people create a gift on Giving Tuesday, does that mean I can't ask them for another gift at the end of the year? And the answer is no. These are preliminary numbers, so just throw that out there. But last year, so in 2023, 80% of people who created a recurring gift on Giving Tuesday made an additional donation to the same organization before the end of the year.
That is wild.
80%.
Huge.
That is a stat. Tim showed it to me and I was like, no, they didn't. Check it again. Yes, they did. And so ask, that's the first thing. Now, the other thing I would tell you to do is update your donors. So thank them and update them before you solicit again. Now,
Yes.
we've all heard
Great
the virtuous cycle. There's the ask, thank, report, repeat. So make your ask them to make a gift, thank them sincerely. Do not send them a task. Don't do that. When you send me a thank you letter and then ask me to give again, don't do that.
No
That
good.
makes me so mad. Report back on their impact and then make an additional ask. Now, here's the thing. Put yourself in a monthly giver's shoes when you are sending them an additional ask. If I'm already giving you $50 a month and you ask me to give you another gift, that's fine. But I need you to tell me why you want me to give on top of my ongoing commitment. And remember, we have data that show that people will give to you again if you ask, but the ask needs to be tailored to them. If I'm a recurring donor and you send me a one-size-fits-all appeal that you send to everyone in your database, it's going to fall flat. But if you tweak just the first paragraph and say, hey, Abby, I know that you're a monthly supporter. We are in the last days. We're working to raise money for this thing. Would you please consider making an additional gift because of blank? Yeah, of course. So
that's that urgency piece, y'all. That's the why should I give now? Right. And so really turning up the volume on that piece so it's compelling and also honoring and identifying, like, we see you. We see that you're already giving on a recurring basis. High fives. Mm-hmm. Here's what we're working on next. And those people want to help. Like, those are, again, your most engaged people. So when you put yourself in the donor shoes, and I think about this for me, if I'm in that position, I signed up to give on a recurring basis. So if you're close, mm-hmm. I want to help you go across the finish line. Yes. The competitive person in me is like, well, let's hit that goal. Yes. Like, what are we doing
now?
So don't,
I'm going to put in the caveat because I just said it and you just said it. When you're asking me to give again, the reason for giving should not be it's the last few days of the year. Because I don't care when it is. And some people like you and I, because of our backgrounds, may be really excited about hitting a goal. A compelling is not like, hey, we're 5% away from our goal. Will you donate to get us there? Like, you and I would probably be stoked about that. Yes, let's get it. The average donor is probably not going to be super motivated by that. What would be much better is we're 5% of our way to achieving blank. We're 5%
outcome, result.
The outcome. So we're 5% away from being able to buy this 1,200.
And I think that's really important to think about just when we're creating those appeals and those stories as motivation, right? Which we've been talking about this whole time. And there are people like me who are going to be motivated. I'm like, I just want to get you across that finish line. I literally gave to my kids PTA yesterday because they were like, we're at 9,000, 15,000 is our goal. Here's where we're at. And I was like, let's go. So there are those people, right? And what's more motivating than a physical numerical goal is the outcome, the result, the aspirational piece.
Yes, definitely. So I get all kinds of appeal. I mean, I pay really close attention to appeals, obviously, but he was like, oh, it's the last 2 days of the year. Like, please give to us because it's the last 2 days of the year. No, like, I'll give to you by the last 2 days of the year because you want to do X in January or whatever. That's
and you do start to blend in. We could talk about this forever. The last 3 days of the year, I look at my inbox and y'all, your email subject lines are all the same. 3 days left, 2 days left, 1 day left. Stop it. Those are not compelling reasons. And we will link to, you also did a separate email report. We'll make sure we link to that there because that gets into like what to do with email, what not to do with email anyway. Amazing. Is there anything else you wanted to share on your end before we wrap up?
I just want to encourage you, if you're listening and you're kind of thinking about maybe starting a recurring giving program, but you're intimidated and you feel like it's a huge monstrous thing. First of all, that's allowed. You're allowed to be scared to do something that you've never done before. It is intimidating. It is worrisome. I hope that you know, after listening to this, that when you are asking someone to make a monthly gift, you're not asking them to do anything onerous or unpleasant. You are inviting them to give regular ongoing support to a cause they love. They will be gracious with you. They will be supportive of you. Just see them, thank them, invite them to stay engaged and watch what happens. Because the growth that we're seeing here is tremendous. And that growth is happening independent of people asking. Your community is ready to do this for you. Give them the opportunity to do that. Please just let them.
Yes. I like to remind people like they're already there. They're already there. They're in your CRM right now. Go ask them. And the people who are listening who are like, okay, I have 11 and I want 100, right? Go love on those 11 and watch the next 11 come in and the next 11 and the next 11 come in. So we ask everybody on the podcast one thought they like to think on purpose. It could be an affirmation, a mantra, anything that you would like to share with us today. I think you've already shared a couple of good ones in the episode, but would you share one with us?
Just any.
Yeah.
All right. So this is something that it sounds very silly, but I think everyone, regardless of their job or what they're working on, could handle it. So my mantra that I have is this: you can do hard things. And the thing I have in front of me, it's over there. I'm an avid hiker, and I did a timed hike with my best friend. You did 20 miles in 8 hours, and it was awful. I was not having fun. It was hot, and the organizers ran out of water, and I hurt myself. So I finished, and I was in pain and angry and thirsty and smelled like a Sasquatch, but I did it. And I have the medal from that hanging in my office. And so when I have to do hard things that I am intimidated by, I can look over there and think I can do hard things. I've done them before and I can do hard things. So if you are, whether you're getting ready to launch your first recurring program, or you're, getting ready for a board meeting that you're scared of, or doing whatever you need to do, look at something you have and remind yourself, I can do hard things. I've done them before and I can do it again.
That's right. So good. That's inner self-talk is what makes this entire work feel amazing and joyous and impactful, or overwhelmed and hard and tight, right? Not that it's always sunflowers and daisies, but that self-talk is so, so important. And it's such a good reminder. Thank you for sharing that with us. All right. How can everyone, we will link to the reports, the notes, but other than that, tell us all the places we can get connected with you and Neon One.
Neon1.com is where we house a lot of research. We have more coming up. I'm already planning research for next year. It's going to be really cool. If you want to talk to me or Neon One, we're both on LinkedIn. I have been taking a hiatus because I live in Florida and it's extremely hot, but I do a lot of like walk and talk videos where I will take you on a hike with me and we'll talk about a statistic and what it means for you. Neon One is always posting on our LinkedIn links to stuff like this and invitations to, talk with us and learn with us and have fun. So do that.
Thank you so, so much. I could talk for like 3 more hours about this data and these trends. So this was so good. But I think this is what everybody needs to start or grow recurring giving and like that push, that boost. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for letting me get excited about this with you.
Hey, high achiever. I know your sights are set on ambitious, world-changing goals. In the Purpose and Profit Club group coaching program, you can get the support, motivation, and strategy to accelerate your impact. I like to say it's where the inner work meets big impact and big funding. Go to splendidcourses.com/waitlist and you will be first to be notified when we open up doors, and you'll get special bonuses when you join our waitlist. See you inside.